Anyway, let's get started. This is the Networking for Creatives panel. I have kind of a problem with I'm old. I have a problem with tech and keeping track of a bunch of things going on at once. So as we established earlier, we're going to wait and take questions at the end. Our facilitator is going to be collecting those questions in the Discord feed, and then she'll paste those into our chat feed here, and then we'll get to as many of those as we can. So I think we'll probably try to get started on those, at about 2:30, and we'll go from there. I'm going to be, due to a lack of information on my part, which is probably my fault, I'm going to be crass and uncouth, and I'm going to let my panelists introduce themselves. So I don't know what order they are on your screen, but I'm going to go ahead and start with Bridget on my screen, and we'll go from there.
Hi, I'm Bridget Smith. I'm an agent at Jabberwocky. I've been at Jabberwocky for about a year, and before that I was at Dunham Literary, and I represent middle grade YA and adult fiction.
Okay, Joshua?
I'm Joshua Bilmes. I founded Jabberwocky Literary Agency like 25 years ago and have been an agent for close to 35 years. And represent lots of top-selling authors like Brandon Sanderson and Charlaine Harris. And I'm really talking up this weekend Nick Martell's The Kingdom of Liars, which I think is like a Brandon Sanderson, Peter Brett level fantasy debut.
Preemi?
I am not an agent. I have about 30 years short stories published. I'm a scientist and a writer, and my debut novel just came out in March, unfortunately during a global pandemic.
Yeah, a lot of people have that problem. LaShawn?
Hi, I'm LaShawn Wanick. I'm also not an agent. I am a writer. Actually, more than that. I write short fiction. Currently working on novel edits for my agent. I also am a book reviewer for Lightspeed magazine, and I am the editor of Okay, I knew this would happen. I would actually have to figure out how to say either Gigantanotosaurus or Giganotosaurus. I don't know which pronunciation is correct because I'm a reader. So, but I'm one of those. I'm the editor of that magazine as well.
Okay. I think most of us know what Gigantosaurus is, or Gigantosaurus. What was it? So
I suppose as editor I can figure it out, but
it's your say. You get to decide.
Right. You haven't had to deal with it in a public setting yet, right?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Okay. And I'm William Ledbetter. I too, most of my writing has been in short fiction, mostly the pulps like FNSF and Asimov's and Analog. But I also have a novel out, and I'll have another one coming out probably close to the end of this year. And they're actually out on audio only. They're through Audible Originals. So if you later on, we're going to have a panel tomorrow about audiobooks and audio, Audible versus regular print. So I'll be able to talk a lot more about that then. Okay, so let's talk about networking. I tend to believe that it's better to have a lot of friends than just like network connections, and this is kind of a philosophy that I've tried to encourage in beginning writers. I mean, I've been a writing mentor for SIFWA and a few other opportunities, and that's one of the things that I really try to always stress is that it's much better to have just a lot of friends in the speculative fiction community than it is to have connections and be networked. So I'm going to go through and let each of you make commentary on that. Do you have a philosophy or a like kind of your own thoughts on that? Let's start with an agent and end with one. Joshua, what do you think? I'm sure it's different for
Well,
agents maybe than it is for writers.
So, I mean, having friends is really important, and that ties in, like, I just think over the long term that you're a lot better off if you're nice to people that you meet along the way. But also, one of the good ways to find those friends is by networking. Um, quite a few of the clients I've taken on, of the connections I've made, they've been by going to conventions and, and networking. And I think for all of the people that are here at this panel, I mean, well, good, because you're gonna make connections even when we're all virtual that are gonna help you accomplish what you want, whether it's finding a good book or finding a publisher for a good book. So,
Okay, LaShawn, what do you think? What do you think about that?
You're calling me next. Yeah, I agree. And yeah, particularly the first time I actually met like actual authors was at a convention, which was interesting because like it wasn't until I moved to Madison, Wisconsin. I grew up with the weird idea that conventions were for really geeky science fiction people who dressed up, and it never occurred to me that it was also a place for networking. I did not know until I moved to Madison and got involved with a science fiction writers group. And they were like, LaShawn, you should come with us to WisCon. And I was like, what's WisCon? And she was like, oh, you need to go, you need to go. So I went to WisCon, which was a feminist science convention. So I wasn't, I figured, well, that will be one of the safer, tamer conventions. And wow, nope, it blew my mind wide open completely. But at the same time, it introduced me to a whole lot of editors and authors that were, all different levels and same boat as me, professional, starting out. And I was like, okay, I found my people. I can't believe I stayed away for so long. So.
Yeah. How about you, Preemie?
Yeah, kind of the same thing, sort of the why did I stay away so long? So I have been writing all my life, but I only started trying to get published about 4 years ago. So I didn't know any writers. I didn't even know any local writers. People move here and they're like, so can you connect me to the local writing community? And I'm like, no, I stay in my house, hunched over a keyboard. I didn't know we had a local writing community. I'm my local writing community. So I've been to a couple of cons now, and it's been really interesting meeting friends that I met on social media and having them sort of try to connect me to their friends. And I think the thing that's helped me the most is making friends with people sort of at the same stage of career as I am, because then you can talk about or vent about something, and the person isn't like, well, with my 13th book, that was definitely an issue, because you're like, well, that doesn't help me. So yeah, definitely friends as a goal of networking. Yeah.
Well, how about you, Bridget? How do you approach this?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. It's generally my philosophy is that when people like you, they want to help you out. And so it's very useful for, cross-promotional purposes to have a lot of writer connections. But it's also really useful, as Prima said, for commiseration. You want to have someone who you can complain to, who knows what you're talking about and is like, I'm going through the same thing. But yeah, when I first started as an agent, I was really freaked out by the idea of networking because agenting as a job is so networking heavy, and you talk to a lot of editors and get to know them and get to know their tastes. And it made me really nervous until I went on my first editor lunch and realized it was talking to a book nerd just like me about books that we both loved. And I was like, oh, this is amazing. I love this. And so it is kind of just getting to know the people around you and what they like and finding points of commonality. And yeah, I agree with Premi is that it's really helpful to have people in your same cohort. A lot of people, when they start networking, really immediately want to go for like the legendary people, the famous and popular people who've been publishing for ages. And they already have a lot of friends, and their whole networked cohort all came up together. So you got to start with the people in your same at your same level and get to know them, because in 10 or 15 years, you guys are going to be the people at the top.
I've noticed that exact same thing. I mean, probably my closest group of friends are all people who started writing around the same time I did. So it's like, yeah, it's interesting. So earlier in my writing career, I heard many times that getting published by the big publishers it's all about who you know. I mean, I heard all these stories. It's like, oh, people get paid under the table. You know, it's like, oh, you got to be friends with these people or they'll never even talk to you and stuff. And since then, I found that that's necessarily not true in most accounts. The work still has to stand on its own. But how can knowing a lot of writers and editors, agents and artists in the industry help your career? Premi, let's start with you this time.
I had heard all those stories as well. And when I started trying to get published, I was told, especially in Canada, oh, you'll never get in unless you know somebody at the publishing house. And I was like, oh, tragic. And then I wandered off and got in through the slush pile. And,
it happens.
It does happen. I do find that there is a lot of what looks like people who are just friends getting their friends deals, but I think that's an illusion caused by social media. They also know that the work has to stand on its own. Publishers aren't charities. They are trying to make a profit. But I have, I guess, kind of an anecdote about that. So, as I said, I've been to a whole 2 conventions in my life, and I spent most of them wandering around the dealer's room going, oh, look, shiny. But at Dublin Worldcon last year, an author friend of mine went and talked me up to a friend of his who had published his books in audio. When I came back, they actually contacted me and said, hey, that book you were talking about, can we take a look at that? We might want to produce it. So a direct benefit came out of just letting my friend take me over to talk to his other friend.
Yep. Bridget, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, most of my clients have come through the slush pile, so I didn't know most of them. They didn't know anyone who knew me. It was just completely, they just wrote a great book and sent it to me, and I loved it. But it definitely does help to, like, if one of my clients recommends someone, I'm always very seriously going to take a look at that, because I love your writing. If you love their writing, then it must be great. So I'm absolutely gonna take this seriously. So it can be really helpful in that way. And so often they are recommending their critique partners and the people that they know. And so that can be really helpful. And it's also, I mean, no one really knows whether blurbs are helpful, but it's really good to know people to send books to when you're starting to look for blurbs, and just people who will start the word of mouth for your book. If people listen to them, they might say, "Oh, I love this person's book. If they love this person's book, this must be a great book. Let me try that out." And so that's just a way of starting word of mouth more than anything else.
Okay, Joshua, what do you think? How do knowing a lot of writers and editors and agents help your career?
It's, sometimes it's a lot easier to get things done in life when you can pull on a string than when you're pushing it. And I think that that's really what it comes down to. When I was sending out the Nick Martell manuscript, because I know a lot of editors, and they know that I don't really go like over the top about something very often. Like when I sent out that manuscript and said, this is the best thing I have for like new fantasy I have in 10 years. There are people who know that actually that means something. And let me sit down and read this, because I don't have this person telling me every 6 weeks that I'm about to have you read the best debut fantasy I've had in 10 years. And so I think that that's part of it. And like to look at one other story from my career, I haven't been an agent who focuses or who has like a lot of the more literary award type books. It's not always where I've gravitated in my personal reading. But just by kind of hanging out at dealers' rooms with Jacob Weissman at Tachyon, I could see that A, he published all sorts of great books, and B, none of them were the kind of thing that I ever represented. But then when I went to him with Brandon Sanderson's The Emperor's Soul and said, you need to publish this. I need you to publish this because of what this novella is and how it deserves to be positioned. He took me very seriously. He knew that I wouldn't be coming and kind of saying, here is the right moment for me to talk to you about a book lightly. And that was just about schmoozing at conventions over like a 10-year period.
Okay. LaShawn, you have something?
For me, it's been kind of a little bit a little bit of butter. It's been a mixed bag. Trying to think of examples. Like for me, it's always been it's nice to know people, but yeah, like it's already been said, your work also has to stand up for its own. So when I've had okay, I'll go with this example. The novelette that I wrote, Sister Rosetta Tharpe, Memphis Minnie, Sing the Stumps Ground Good. That was something where I've written it during a hard time in my life and didn't really know exactly where to send it to. It eventually got picked up by Faya magazine, which is an awesome magazine, by the way. But I didn't know, I didn't know who they were at the time. I followed them, but I followed them on Twitter, but I didn't really know, if they would pick up my story or not. And they did, and it was like nice. And I've never met these people before, it was like, oh, that's nice, this is cute. But what came out when they put that entire issue together, it was an amazing issue, and it wound up, and just the style of it was enough to get people to start talking about it. And it's like, yeah, and then my own story got reprinted by Apex because of that. And then it got picked up for the 2018 Best American Science Fiction and Fantasy anthology, which kind of blew my mind, because I didn't expect that to happen. Really, I didn't. So
one thing leads to another.
Yeah. But because of that, also, I've also had times where I've been asked to be in an anthology, and it was more, solicited in that regard because I knew people, and apparently they're like, hey, you want to be in this anthology? Hey, send me something. I'm like, okay, yeah. So that's helped a lot. So it's I would say that the two kind of go hand in hand in some cases. The writing can open up connections. Connections can open up writing. They go hand in hand. Yeah.
That's right. So, okay, we've been talking about like the value and the necessity maybe of networking, but what are some ways to network? I mean, it's like newbies coming in, going to a con for the first time. It's like, I don't know any of these people, or I don't know how to do this, So how do we go about doing this? I mean, I've been going to conventions for 20 years now, so I've kind of, it just seems to kind of come natural to me now. But I remember when I first started that it's like I was, kind of like terrified. So you have some do's and don'ts. Let's start with Bridget.
Sure. Yeah, do's and don'ts. Be interesting and funny and a good conversational partner, and then people will, want to talk to you. But you can't be afraid to approach strangers, because you're going to walk into a room full of strangers, and if you just sit there by yourself, I have actually found that a lot of cons, people will come up to you and be like, "Is this your first time? Have you ever been here before? Do you not know anyone in this room?" And they're usually very welcoming and open to talking to you and getting to know you. But yeah, you can also approach people, someone sitting alone at the bar, a small group having a conversation. And once you know a couple of people, it starts to get a lot easier because they start introducing you to people, and you can go to panels together, you can get lunch together. And it also gets much easier to approach a small group that's talking when you know one person in that group, and you can go up and say, "Hi, good to see you again," and then they introduce you to everyone else, and then those people will become parts of other groups that you can approach. So you kind of have to start the ball rolling, and just be friendly and nice and interesting, and as open to meeting new people and getting to know them. And that's how you start to find people that you actually really like and want to spend time with.
Okay, LaShawn?
Yeah. Yeah, that that's one. So, and I'll talk to the introverts in the audience because I'm sort of like half extro, half introvert, but yeah, it can also be daunting. So for me, when I first started going to cons, and it was like, okay, I would just find one person to talk to, and that would be enough for me. But that one person would then know other people, and they'll be like, here, let me introduce you to this. And that actually does happen a lot of cons, is here, let me introduce you. And soon you'll find yourself being dragged to talk to all sorts of people, which if you're an introvert, it's like awesome and horrible. And it's like, so.
Yeah, it's one thing to do for a con that I have found as an introvert, is to set aside some time in the afternoon to just go lie down on your hotel bed.
Yes.
Yeah.
Quietly with the lights off.
But another thing that you can do is social media, which, okay, yeah, it's on fire right now, but one of the things to do is follow your favorite authors online. Usually they, and not just follow, but also interact with them, and also be nice about it. Don't pester them for like, the secrets of everything. Just just follow them, and just interact. They're people, and talk to them. And sometimes there'll be people that I that I will see constantly on Twitter, and then I'll meet them at a conference, like, oh, you're that person, hey, let's talk and chat. And yeah, it's a great way if you're not actually a con person, it's a great way of networking. So yeah.
Yeah, and that way, a lot of times when you arrive at a con, you already know people there that you can kind of, and you can kind of set things up on social media. So it's like, anybody else going to this con? And it's like, oh well, yeah, and then that way you can kind of start out with a foot up by having a few people there. Joshua?
Yeah, I think, one of the things for me is, even now, if I go to like a mystery convention, and I have a lot fewer clients at a mystery convention, I don't know as many people. It's very humbling to be reminded of what it can be like to be a new author at a science fiction convention and you don't know anybody. Having to force that little extra effort to try and to go up to somebody and say, hi, I'm Joshua Bilmus, and they don't know who I am. And that isn't what I'm used to when I'm at home in the kind of science fiction community. But it's also like, especially for me, I'm at a convention to meet people. If I didn't want to meet people, I wouldn't go to the convention, or I wouldn't be on programming at the convention. There are plenty of people who go to a convention and you never see them.
Yeah,
Like
they go hide in their hotel
publishers,
room the whole
the
time.
only time I see them is in the hotel lobby at 6 o'clock on a Saturday night when they're getting their posse ready to go to the publisher dinner or something. And otherwise, they've been there just doing their separate professional convention. If I'm on programming, if I'm out there for people to come up and approach me. So feel free to do it. I want you to do it, and try and remember that you don't need to be too nervous when you're doing the exact thing that somebody's expecting and hoping you'll do.
Preemie?
Yeah, I don't know. I kind of have mixed thoughts about cons. Again, I've only been to two. The first was kind of a very small con that was kind of a resurrection of an older one that a group of friends had put on. So they all wanted to catch up with each other, and there were several dozen people that kind of very much stuck to themselves and weren't very welcoming to strangers. So I had a pretty bad experience there, and talking to people afterwards, a lot of us felt sort of very left out or pushed out. But at Worldcon last year, exactly what LaShawn was talking about happened. So people were coming up to me. They're like, I think I know you from Twitter. Like, hundreds of people. I was like, oh God. I don't leave my house very often. But it's nice because then you already feel like you know these people. Like, hey, I've talked to you 3 times a week for the past 2 years, and now we are meeting in person. So you've kind of got a friend built in at the convention. And I guess just in last terms of do's and don'ts, do bring business cards, because I did last time and I kept forgetting to hand them out, even though I had a thick deck of them and they were quite nice. And also, if you are an introvert, make sure you've got an extrovert friend going that you can kind of clamp onto for various events, because they'll just take you around. They love it. They don't care if they're like dragging somebody around. It's like a hobby for them.
That's right.
Yeah. I wanted to also add on to what Primi said, because of your first con experience was so horrible. I think some just suggestions of good first cons. I haven't been to WisCon, but like LaShawn said, I've heard fantastic things about it. Everyone I know who's gone has loved it. I've also had really good experiences at ReaderCon and the Nebulas, because those are sort of smaller, more intimate things where it's not overwhelming and a lot of people know each other, but they're also very open to meeting new people and introducing new writers to the people that they know. So I can recommend any of those.
Okay. Yeah, I've been, like I said, I've been going to conventions for a long time, and I go primarily for that reason, not just to hang out with my friends, and I'm on paneling to earn my keep and to get my name out there, I guess. But But I have a great time meeting new people. There are some ways for new writers that they can kind of help them meet new people, and like conventions are always looking for volunteers. So if you volunteer, then you not only get an opportunity to interact with the with the con organization, but also in depending on what you're doing for the convention, then you get to talk to a lot of the attendees as well, and go go to readings, because a lot of times you'll be in a you'll go to a writer's reading, and there'll be maybe 5 or 6 people in there, and it just becomes it's like they finish 10 minutes early, and it becomes an intimate conversation about about their writing, and what are you writing, and all this kind of stuff, and it's a way to get to know people. I like going to coffee clatches, even though I go even though I go to people who are the same level writer as me sometimes, if I've never met them before. It's an opportunity for me to meet them, or sometimes you only interact with agents or editors via like the internet or email, and it's great if you can get an opportunity to meet them in person, and then you also meet the other people who've gone to those as well. And what Bridget said earlier about not being afraid, it's like you see a clump of people talking and there's somebody there that you want to meet. It's like just kind of sidle up to the edge of the circle. 9 times out of 10, somebody in the circle will turn your way and say, well, what do you think, or what's your name, or whatever. It's because we try to be aware, when somebody's like interested in joining the conversation. But a lot of times if they're sitting and having an intimate one-on-one with somebody at coffee or dinner, or even out in the hotel, you might want to like not interrupt them, that because they might have been looking for that person for 3 days, and they finally cornered them and can talk to them, and now you've come up and kind of derailed things. But so just kind of be careful about when you approach people, but don't be afraid to do it. So
yeah, just to build off of that, just remember that all of us have at one time been that person attending their first con who doesn't really know anyone. And so most of the time people are very open to inviting you into the circle and trying to get you to introduce you to people and make sure that you have a good experience, because someone did that for us at our first con.
right.
And sometimes, oh, sorry, Joshua, were you going to say something?
Well, one other suggestion that I'd make is, find something that you like to do as a networking thing, a particular convention or place or hangout or whatever, and make a point of doing it consistently. Looking at my own career, I just think that the fact that there are places like Boscone and Balticon that I've now gone to pretty much every year for 12 years or something, what I get out of it increases with each year just because of the consistency of my presence in the place. So that just a small thought.
Okay. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we're going to break for the audience questions. Does anybody, there's been a couple of these already. Does anybody else have specific examples of where who you knew made a difference? I know in my particular case, I've been invited to submit to anthologies. I've been talked to about coming to different cons and being a guest. I've been I actually run a couple short fiction contests, and I got connected with those through people at conventions. I think I think editors and slush readers and things like that are human. I think when they know you and you pop up in their inbox, I think there's a chance that even though if they didn't know you, they might stop a page or two into your manuscript. If they know you, they might give you the benefit of the doubt and read the entire thing. So networking can help in little ways. You know, it's like, it's not necessarily going to get you that next big book deal, but it's cumulative and a lot like the description said. So Primi, what do you think? Do you have any specific examples that you haven't mentioned yet, or?
I have been solicited for a couple of stories, not because the editor of the anthology me, but because a friend had recommended me to them, and they specifically said that in the email. So that's been really nice. But I have sort of an anti-story, not really story, but I slush for Escape Pod, and everything's completely anonymized. So even if there was someone that I might recognize in the slush, they're going to have to send subliminal signals because there's no identifying information. So,
Right.
like we always say, the work does have to stand on its own.
And that's a good thing, yeah. Okay, well, how about you, Bridget? Anything you haven't mentioned yet that you'd like to?
Well, yeah, I've found that just for me personally as an agent, one of the things that happens a lot is I get invited to conferences because someone that I'm friendly with was an agent or an editor at a previous conference, and they said, "Oh, you should invite Bridget. She'd be a great person to have on faculty." And so that's how I get a lot of invitations to like writers' conferences. And so that can be really helpful. But yeah, the thing I always think of, I've started thinking of here is when Brooklyn Nine-Nine was canceled, NBC didn't pick it up because it was so wildly successful that they had to have it. They picked it up because they really like working with Mike Schur. And they wanted to have more of his work and they wanted to support him. So that was like what it's both the value of being a person who is nice and easy to work with, as well as the value of just of knowing people.
Joshua, any thoughts?
Well, I started networking before I even knew what I was doing. I wrote letters to the editor of Analog, Stan Schmidt, at that time, critiquing each issue when I was in high school. And that's a form of networking, which I know now, but back then I was just being like a, high school nerd type, sending mail to somebody who would actually answer me. But that was how I made my first connections in the field. Betsy Mitchell, who went on to edit at Warner and Del Rey and other places, was then the associate editor at Analog, was hired by Jim Bain to help start up Bain Books, and offered me freelance work based on these geeky letters I was writing to Stan Schmidt. So sometimes just by following your passions, you can be networking.
Sean, and then we'll wrap
Yeah.
this up, go to questions.
Yeah, I basically bouncing off of what Joshua said. A lot of what came about for me as far as the solicitous stuff go, and I said it before, it was just basically relationships with people who then would say later on, hey, we're putting together an anthology, we thought of you, would you like to do it? And I was like, yeah, sure. Yeah, and that's because I have a day job. I don't do a lot of freelancing. I want to, but I don't. But I found that a lot, just basically having those connections still keep me, connected within the literary field. And I'm always surprised when somebody said, hey, we heard from you from so and so that, and we love your work, would you be willing to do this? And I'll be like, really? Okay. so yeah. It's a fun thing, and yeah, I enjoy it. Yeah.
Okay, Well, let's go to the questions that have been, they've started feeding them to me. I don't know if we'll get to all of them or not, but the first one is, are there pitfalls to approaching agents or writers at a convention? Who wants to volunteer that? Answer
Okay,
that one.
I can start
Okay.
that. Yeah. So I think one thing that will, they'll tell you if you're going up, be professional, don't be a jackass, think of it as a relationship, and not just something, to get to the thing. You're again, these are people you're dealing with, and you're establishing a relationship. Yeah, if you're just doing it just to further your name, people will pick up on that real fast and will not want to do business with you. So yeah, make the friendship genuine. So and on the flip side, it's okay to, if you see your favorite author, to go up and kind of freak out a bit, because sometimes it makes a very lasting impression. But at the same time, yeah. So one of my favorite stories I like telling is when I met Nisi Shaw for the first time at WisCon, and it was my first WisCon. And I've been reading Nisi Shaw stuff and didn't really actually know that she was going to be at WisCon. So while I was registering, I turned around and saw her coming up the stairs with her mom. And it was like, she was talking, and, me being friendly, it's like, I'm talking. And she was like, somebody says, "Oh, it's Nisi Shaw." I'm like, "Nisi Shaw? Nisi Shaw?" Had an absolute utter freak out, which apparently was the first time that ever happened to Nisi. So she was like, "Who is this person?" And yeah, and since then, I've been able. I love her. She is amazing. She's become a mentor to me, and she's just the sweetest person. And but yeah, she'll even talk about the day when LaShawn Wannick first saw her, and had a near meltdown because it was one of her favorite authors. So yeah.
Yeah, to build off of what LaShawn said, when approaching agents specifically, just be a person. I'm always much more interested, no matter what, if you pitch me at a con, I'm probably just going to say, send me a query and some pages, because I need to see the writing anyway. And if you also don't happen to meet me and be able to pitch, if you say, "Oh, I saw you on this panel and I really enjoyed what you have to say, and I hope you like this book," I'm going to take that just as seriously as if you did actually find me in the hallway and pitch me. But I'm much more excited to read the book from the person I had a really great conversation with at the bar that was completely unrelated to what they were writing than I am by the person who found me in the elevator and pitched me. If I'm able to remember who you are and how much I liked talking to you, those are the people I want to work with. So yeah, just be friendly, be personable, be professional, and just remember that you're a person talking to a person, and that's the connection you're trying to establish.
Yeah, I want to expand on that a little bit. It's a slightly off the topic, but it expands on what LaShawn has said and others have said about just being nice and being professional. I mean, I was at a con where, I knew this guy who had a story published with a small press, and he had grown more and more successful, since that he had published that story. And he gave that editor who was at the con the total cold shoulder. It's like he wouldn't have anything to do with her, and he would tell his friends, it's like, "Oh, she's terrible. Don't send her anything." Well, it's like, it's a small world. I mean, it's like this editor has a lot of friends, a lot of writer friends. She has a lot of friends in the industry, other editors, and everybody talks. It's like, just don't be a butthole. It's like, be nice to people. Treat them the way that you would like to be treated. Don't use them like, "Oh, well, I'm done with you as a stepping stone, so I don't need to talk to you anymore." Um, Okay, another question, and I'm not sure really how to approach this. Maybe one of you can do that. It says, any tips on virtual networking, both given current circumstances and also for those who have difficulty attending a lot of in-person events? Anybody want to tackle that? Virtual networking?
I'm just starting to figure it out. We're all in that together.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
that kind of falls back in with the social networking, getting to know people through that. So it's kind of along the same lines, I think, right?
Yeah, Twitter is really useful for that. I mentioned in a previous panel I was on the Absolute Right forums. Codex is another one that I've heard people say good things about. Any place where you can all get in the same virtual room and talk about writing and books is really helpful.
Yeah, I would second Codex. Codex is an amazing forum. You do have to have at least, there are specific guidelines for getting into Codex, but once you get in there, it's an amazing group of people who are, they're very, they would love to take new people on, and, and it's great for people who like to lurk because you can go in and read the forum titles, and just it's like a messenger board. Yeah, you read the titles and read the different responses to it. Swiffa is another one, and in fact with Swiffa, I just recently joined Swiffa myself. I haven't for the longest time, but one of the things that really drew me in was the mentor program, which you don't have to be part of. So that's actually a great way of networking as well, is to sign up to be a mentor in Swiffa. And they'll pair you, with somebody. And yeah, it's a more small scale way of networking, really, because you're learning how to, encourage each other, lift each other up, and and when things come out, you boost each other's work. That's basically what it is. And then you have a friendship, and it's, and you see each other on social media, and before you know it, there's a connection. So yeah.
Yeah, the SIFWA, I've been part of the SIFWA mentorship program, and what I think, to expand on what you said, it's like you don't have to be a member of SIFWA either as a mentor or a mentee. You can be part of the program without being a member of SIFWA. So, oh, and by the way, I 100% agree with Codex. It's a great online community. Okay. Is it important to network primarily within genre-specific circles if you write in more than one genre? For any suggestions? Anybody want to jump on that?
I mean, it makes sense if you've written a science fiction or fantasy novel and you want to find a publisher, to be going to World Fantasy and not Boucher Con. I mean, that's just common sense. If you're trying to start out in a lot of different places, spread the net wide, but you need to go where the fishes are.
I think it can be, it's really helpful. It depends on what you're networking for, because I think that it's important to have people who are writing in the same genre as you, the same category, for the purposes of making connections. Like if you want to turn that into sales and to word of mouth and mutual promotion, etc., they need to be in the same category. But if you are also looking for writer friends who can just commiserate with you as you like go through the process of querying and submissions and being published and all of that, they don't necessarily have to be in the same writing the same things. So I think there's virtue in both.
Well, I think we could probably talk about this easily for another hour, but we have hit our stop time. We have to give the next panel time to get in and get set up. So thanks for coming, everybody, and thanks especially to all my great panelists. This has been a lot of fun.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thank you.
Yeah.